What's going on, fellas? I'm editing this video right now. As I mentioned at the end of the video, I am a bit sick. The head is a bit foggy. Didn't organize my thoughts all that well in this video, but please bear with me. Thank you guys for watching. What's going on, fellas? It's old Coach Samwise here. I'm going to continue this streak of making videos as though all of you guys are my clients. I don't think that's going to ever feel less presumptuous, but it's been a really cool lens to make these videos. It's kind of made making them fun again, so we're going to keep getting after it with another super cool video. Today, I'm going to talk about what to do with your accessories if you're kind of lost, if you feel like you're not getting much out of the accessory portion of your workout. If you're cruising along and you're getting stronger, don't change really what you're doing until it stops working, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it is a very good general rule of thumb. You can always ask that question of what if it could be better? And while I don't think that's a useless question, I think there's a lot of function in not messing with something as long as it's working. But if you don't feel like it's working and you're trying to regain that footing, I got some ideas for you, right? So I've talked about on this channel many times how there's maybe reasonably good evidence to suggest that accumulating more sets with 1, 2, 3 reps in reserve is maybe a more effective means of hypertrophy than doing less sets all out. That is to say that those final reps of a set are more fatiguing than they are stimulative. So it makes more sense to cut those off and then do more sets to make the session equally difficult, because difficulty is key, and that's something we're going to touch on in a minute. That being said, there is also reasonable evidence to suggest that people are not very good at gauging how many reps they have in reserve. And this is something that I can definitely anecdotally back up looking around the gym. When I see people doing their accessory work at 7, because on paper, that's a great workout, that is sub 6. That is very far sub 6. That 3 reps in reserve, 2 reps in reserve that I see people have in their program and go to execute is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's really, really bad. And so these sets are falling below the threshold of what we consider to be a stimulative set. They become almost just a waste of time on some level, right? So that's why I have been a vocal advocate for, on our big compounds where we have a very large global fatigue component, we probably should subscribe to this model of accumulating more work sets with a few more reps in reserve, get good at gauging the skill of, okay, well, how many reps in reserve did I have on that squat, bench, deadlift? Being able to accurately assess your RPE is a skill that we should probably get to learn, right? Because I think that is where we can gain the skill and be accurate with our RPEs, and that's part of getting better as a lifter. And I find that's a better strategy, especially if we go into a hypertrophy phase and someone says, I want to do one all-out set of 8 to 12 on squats, and another guy says, okay, I'm going to leave 2 to 3 reps in reserve, so RPE 7 to 8, maybe even 6, and I'm going to do 3 sets. I think both of those guys are going to be able to get stronger week to week, but the person who is doing the sets leaving a little bit in reserve is laying down a good technical foundation. So when the weights get heavier and we enter a strength phase and a peaking phase, they're starting from pristine technique and not having drilled a bunch of reps with breakdown. Whereas unless the guy doing the all-out 8 to 12 is a very advanced lifter, he's already began drilling really poor reps, and it's only going to get worse from there. So anecdotally, I've always seen that the accumulating sub-maximal sets on your main compounds to be a bit superior. That being said, when we're rotating through different accessories, people haven't accumulated that skill of being really good with their RPE. And so if we're looking at a more isolated lift, or we don't have some significant global fatigue, we might want to just bite the bullet and train that to mechanical failure. Yes, it's a small deviation from optimal, but it keeps us accountable for being accurate with the reps in reserve. The only completely idiot-proof reps in reserve is 0. Right? And especially it takes away our ability to be biased at the end of a session. If you just had a hard squat day, but you're programmed, let's say 3 sets of leg extensions at 7, that fatigue might really start to bias your assessment of 3 RIR. Whereas if we are training mechanical failure, we have an accountability system for our effort. And that's kind of what I wanted to get to, which is I see people do their accessories in such a way that I don't think they're hitting sufficient difficulty. This general phenomenon is why you'll see people get good results from like a really hardline hit routine, like let's say Mike Menser stuff, where you just do one all-out set once a week. right? They go from doing 0 sets difficult enough to be significantly stimulative to 1, and they start seeing great gains because that's an increase, right? What confuses me a little bit is they'll think it's the 1 set per week that drove the gains, not the going all out part, right? I think that it makes more sense to assume that the going all out part was why you got better. And then the logical question that I think should arise, that doesn't seem to be asked by some people, is, well, what happens if I do 2 all out sets? Am I going to overtrain and fatigue, or would that be even better? That's the logical question. And the answer to that question is basically always you get even better results. There isn't a cap at 1. Right? But I do think that's a good framework when we're starting to approach our accessories. Maybe we're not feeling like we're getting much out of them. Let's start with 1 set going truly all out to mechanical failure with strict form. So what I would do is I would take the accessories that you're doing. Let's say it's after a deadlift day. We have some back extensions for some extra hip hinging volume. We have some hamstring curls, maybe a pull down and a row. Pretty standard supplemental work for a deadlifting session. I would probably have a lot of people, if they are chronically undershooting and they aren't good at assessing their RPs on these motions, take 1 set of each, right? Go like 8 to 15. If you get 15, put more weight on, and going all out on each one. And as long as they're getting better each week, I would stay at 1 set. Now, ultimately, this is probably less volume than most natural lifters are going to benefit from. If you're natural, but you're a big, strong guy, you're 220, 230 plus, you might be able to do enough damage with single sets depending on the exercise that this is a sustainably effective workload. But if you're not that strong and each set doesn't pose as significant of a stimulus, eventually the gains are going to come to a halt. You're like, okay, well, I'm doing my 1 set of pull downs each week and I've kind of stalled. And that's where we can start. Okay, it starts with effort. We found what true effort looks like. 1 set wasn't enough. Now we do 2. So we could do 2 top sets. We could do 1 top set and a back off to kind of vary the rep ranges and keep you accountable for trying to beat the books. 1 set of 8 to 12, 1 set of 12 to 20, beat the books each time. You could use intensifiers such as partials, such as rest pauses, such as drop sets would be a great one to add in more volume as soon as you hit the point that that 1 all-out set on that accessory isn't enough to keep you moving forward week to week. Maybe you do 1 set and an intensifier, or 1 set and a back off, 1 set and 2 back offs once we need to. But it all starts with, let's just calibrate our RPE and find what it means and what it feels like to go all out on each of these accessories as an accountability system. And once you're good at this, we can return to that 1, 2, 3 RIR accumulate volume system, but you need to calibrate your senses for what failure is on each exercise. And that's kind of a problem if you take that sub-maximal approach from the get-go. Well, yeah, we've all failed benches. We're all trying to get stronger. We all kind of over-expect ourselves, so we know what a 10 feels like. There are people, if you jump right into RPE 7 tricep press downs, that have never failed a press down. They've never hit a 10, so they have no idea what a 10 is. So what they think is a 6 is a RPE negative 10 or something, right? So I would recommend, or I would try something like this approach. Let's just take 1 difficult set on any motion where we feel it's a pretty safe and effective means. Maybe I wouldn't do a set to genuine failure on a leg press. Maybe I wouldn't do a set to genuine failure on a hack squat without a lot of prior training history. But simple single joint motions, I think that it can be a great skill. Obviously, these aren't just going crazy and letting our form loose, but really applying intensity and also having the discipline to keep our form standardized. We're going to ride out that 1 set. As long as we can beat the books each week, let's go. And then when this motion starts to slow down and that this motion starts to freeze, we can look to add additional difficulty on top of that 1 set, because that 1 set probably isn't enough to keep going forever unless you're a big, strong guy and you're moving a lot of tonnage in that 1 set. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to accumulate a little bit more volume, but it all hinges on that effort. All right, wrapping up. I'm also being very deliberate about using the word effort instead of intensity. Historically, in terms of people that participated in bodybuilding, the term intensity has been used to refer to just the overall effort with which someone is training. If you say someone trains with crazy intensity, it evokes images of Dorian Yates and Blood and Guts, just giving everything he's got to each individual set. That's someone who trains with really high intensity. Maybe there are guys who train more of a volume approach, but their intensity is still high in the colloquial definition of it. Now, recently, people have come from their exercise science programs and said, well, you idiots, intensity actually means percentage on the bar. right? So, you know, if you train with high volume, you can't be training with high intensity. That's awesome, man. Words have multiple meanings, and meanings are defined by how people actually use them in day-to-day life. More people are going to evoke the image of trying really hard than the image of a high percentage. When you say intensity, it conveys the meaning. I'm rambling a little bit, but this is a little pet peeve of mine because language is a little bit more complicated than everybody who uses it this way is wrong because the textbook says this. Language doesn't quite work that way. Language evolves with how people use the language. So I definitely think intensity is a perfectly fine term, but you might need to specify, depending on who you're talking to, what it is you mean, because intensity will also be used in more of a pure powerlifting sense to mean percentage, like relative intensity or absolute intensity, right? So an absolute intensity would be the total tonnage on the bar, regardless of how difficult that is for you. So a 1,000-pound squat has a greater absolute intensity than a 500-pound squat, even if it's 100% for either of you. And I think that does have some value when we're assessing a program and adjusting metrics, because absolute intensity does matter. Absolute tonnage does have some impact on people's ability to recover from something. And then relative intensity would just be, what is that percentage of your max? All of this is perfectly valid. I'm not shitting on you if you use the term intensity to mean percentage. I'm just shitting on you if you're really bitchy about it and you correct people who were doing a perfectly good job communicating. So that's my little end of the video rant. Thank you guys for watching my video. I hope this one turned out okay. I'm sick as a dog, so organizing my thoughts was a little bit more difficult than usual. Thank you for watching.